Hi everyone, welcome to lesson 7. Today we're going to be talking about functions and pointers. We've introduced these concepts to you in previous lessons, but today we're going to look at them in a little more detail. So to kind of start off as a little bit of a recap, when you're declaring a function, you have to declare it inside of main so that you can later call the function from main. If you do ever declare a function outside of main, then it would be called a global function. When you're declaring a function, you have to specify what type of information you want passed into the function. These are called arguments. So in this example, we see this function void fun int x, int y, int z. And in this case, int x, int y, and int z are the arguments. The arguments are essentially the data types that your function will be taking. When you're defining a function, it's possible to actually define your function outside of main. So in this example, we see that we've declared the function void fun here, but we've actually defined it outside of main. And what ends up happening is that when you call your function inside of main, it'll see fun, and then it'll look for where fun is defined. So we'll use this analogy of island hopping. So say this blue box here is main. You don't see the main written here, but inside of main, we call fun. And when the program reads fun, it's going to jump outside to another island where fun is defined. So if we go back a slide, that would basically mean when you see fun called somewhere inside of main, then the program is going to jump to where it's defined. It's going to read what's happening in here, follow that process, and then jump back to do the next step. So when it's done going through fun, it'll jump back and it'll see that get care is the next item to do. And that's basically what our island hopping analogy is that happens when you call a function. So as I explained, you can have a function that has a void in front of it. What that means is that you're not going to be returning any values. Now, some of you might be wondering, what's the point of having a function if you're not going to return anything from it? And the reason sometimes we have void functions is because let's say your function is going to be manipulating some of the numbers that are inside of main, but you need to later use those numbers within main, then you don't need to really return anything. So if that kind of makes sense, sometimes you can have a function that isn't returning any value. On the flip side, you can have a function that has no arguments but does return a value. So you can see over here we have this function int sum, and it's not taking any arguments. But we are able to still call it. And basically what's happening is that we've defined a and b inside of our function int sum, and we're only ever using a and b. So the value a and b aren't changing. That's why we're able to define it in our function, and we're returning this value sum. Let's say you wanted to create a function sum where the user can input two numbers and then sum them together. Then you would need to make an argument int sum with arguments int a and int b. But in this case, we don't need it. And that's why we're still able to return a value even though we don't have any arguments in there. So for example, just kind of an output of what happened over here, we had a equals 50 and b equals 80. Even though we didn't input anything, our function gave an output of 16. And basically in main, we used a printf to let the user know that this is what the end result was, as you can see over here. And the last case is where you're going to have functions with arguments as well as return values. So over here, we're passing values into our function when we call it. So as I mentioned, functions have arguments when you're defining them. But when you're calling a function, you're passing them parameters. So basically, int a and pointer int array is what you call arguments. And then what you're passing to the function when you call it is a parameter. So in the main, after this function reads what's written over here, it prints out all the new values in the array. So if you're just kind of remembering back to last week's lesson, we covered the difference between call by reference and call by value. So as you kind of look at this example, try to think about how call by reference and call by value is used, and why this program is actually able to work. And this is just the output of what our function was doing over here. We wanted to print the new values, which was the original value plus 50. So you can see that here. So taking a quick look at pointers. Pointers are variables that store the address of another variable. If you've ever looked at any other programming language, you can consider pointers similar to objects in object-oriented programming. And basically what's happening with pointers is that they're storing the address of another variable. And the syntax for that is you give your data type, but you use this asterisk. And that asterisk lets the program know that it's a pointer variable and not a normal variable. So to assign the address of the variable, you're gonna first declare the pointer variable, and then you're gonna initialize it with this and sign. And the and sign tells the pointer that I'm giving you the address or the location of my variable. So just as a quick example, we can see that we've declared a pointer variable over here, and we gave it this address, Q. And over here, when we ask to print what pointer is, we're going to display 50 because we asked about the address of pointer, and pointer has an address of 50. So obviously this is a little bit more broad, and in our homework assignment this week, you're going to be looking at how you can use both a pointer and a function combined to accomplish your task. If you have any questions about these, always feel free to email us, and I wish you best of luck with the next assignment.